Welcome, everybody. It's fantastic to have each of you with us on today's webinar entitled The Changing Classroom Context, the Impact of the Common Core on Communities and Grant Making. My name is Christina Hueso, Senior Program Officer of the W. Clement and Jesse V. Stone Foundation in San Francisco. I'm a member of both Grantmakers for Education's Board of Directors and Education Policy Working Group. Today's webinar is brought to you by GFE in partnership with our Education Policy Working Group. GFE's mission is to strengthen philanthropy's capacity to improve education outcomes for all learners, an effort we accomplish by offering impactful place-based and e-based programming, as well as knowledge products such as benchmarking, which provides data and analysis on the latest trends in education philanthropy. And Kimberlyn, if you could advance to the next slide. GFE's 2012 benchmarking report highlights that only 24% of our members are making grants to support the Common Core, which is relatively low considering the enactment of new policies such as Common Core state standards and related assessments. Although benchmarking is critical to helping us better serve our members, you can find other helpful reports available for download on our website at www.edfunders.org. Within GFE, we have 3 funder networks designed to bring together grant makers who fund specific areas of education reform. And as mentioned earlier, today's webinar is brought to you by our Education Policy Group. The Education Policy Working Group exists to deepen grant makers' knowledge around the education policy-related strategies grant makers can employ to dramatically improve outcomes for all students. We aim to develop meaningful opportunities for funders to learn and connect with each other as they explore these strategies and share effective practices. At a time when more education funders than ever appreciate the value of engaging in education policy, the working group's efforts are unique and valuable. All GFE members are invited to become a member of the Education Policy Working Group. If you'd like to do so, please contact GFE's Program and Network Manager, Kimberlyn Butler, at kimberlyn@edfunders.org. And I just want to say a special thank you to Kimberlyn for helping us set up this webinar today. Before jumping into our presentation, let me take a minute to highlight a few of our webinar platform's key elements. Because the lines will be muted, you can easily submit questions throughout the presentation using the Chat with Presenter dialog box in the left panel of your screen. Kimberlyn will be fielding questions for the moderator to pose to speakers at the end of the webinar. You may also raise your hand if you would like the moderator to chat directly with you regarding a particular question. Finally, for better viewing experience, please feel free to select full screen in the top right corner of the page. If at any time during the webinar you have logistical challenges, please dial 1-800-246-1442 and provide access code 595-2100 for immediate assistance. This number and access code can also be found in your invitation. At the end of today's presentation, the full web and audio file will be available for you as an MP4 file. We will also post slides and a recording of the webinar on GFE's website. Let me also take a minute to thank today's presenters, including Gina Dalma of the Silicon Valley Community Foundation, Jennifer Grassham of the J.F. Maddox Foundation, Gedelia Lopez of the Chicago Community Trust. Again, thank you all for joining us. And with that, let me turn the virtual baton over to David Biemesderfer of the Florida Philanthropic Network, our moderator today. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Christina. And let me also welcome you all to today's webinar. FPN is pleased to be a longtime partner with GFE and all of their education policy work, and I'm pleased to be the moderator today for this webinar. And our main goal for this webinar today is to help funders understand how the Common Core changes the context in which you're working and to offer you some concrete models for how place-based funders can respond. To get started, we'd like to ask a poll question here. If you could look and indicate what you are funding, if anything, around the Common Core right now to help give a background to our presenters about where you all are at in funding the Common Core. Okay, it looks that as the results are coming in, we're seeing that about 40% of you are not funding the Common Core at all. About a little over a third of you are doing capacity building for educators, and then about 16% are doing curriculum instruction or communications or advocacy, and then 11% are doing other types of work. So that's great. That's helpful to see. And I think we'll go on to the next question. Just indicate what type of grant-making organization you represent. We'd like to know who we have on the line today. Okay. Wonderful. It looks like a little over half of you represent private or family foundations, about 13% community, about a little over 20% corporate, and then about 12% either operating foundations or other. So wonderful, wonderful. Thank you for those responses. That's really helpful to get some context of who's on the line today. I'm going to give just a very brief 2-minute quick Common Core 101 to lay the groundwork to ensure we're all on the same page in terms of what's happening with the Common Core today in our country. As many of you may know, currently 45 states plus the District of Columbia have adopted both the math and English language arts and literacy portions of the Common Core state standards. Minnesota has adopted just the English language arts but not the math. And then 4 states have not adopted either. Rollout of the Common Core is happening now, and most states are expected to be fully implemented by the 2014-2015 school year. So these changes are happening very quickly. I know here in Florida it certainly seems to be going at a very quick pace. I wanted to just spend 1 minute or so on some of the core key instructional shifts that are happening in the classrooms around the Common Core. People often talk about 6 instructional shifts embedded in the standards, and we condensed them here to 3 for ease of presentation. In math, one of the key shifts in instruction is around focus. Rather than covering today's curriculum that's more a mile wide and inch deep, teachers are significantly narrowing and deepening the time and energy they spend in the math classroom. For example, an analysis of 3rd grade math standards in Tennessee found that the Common Core reduced the total number of standards from 113 to 25. Another key shift is in coherence. And what we mean by that is that principals and teachers are trying to carefully connect the learning across grades so that students can build new understanding on 2 foundations built in previous grades. And the new math standards are going to be more rigorous. The Common Core is going to help students access concepts from a number of perspectives and have real-world applications embedded into the learning. Also in the literacy shifts, there's one of the most significant shifts in learning is around text. While the standards still demand substantial attention to literature, they also require more attention to nonfiction content. In the area of analysis, the Common Core puts a premium on students writing to sources and using evidence from text to present careful analysis, well-defended claims, and clear information. And the Common Core also emphasizes the importance of students accessing complex grade-level texts and using academic vocabulary to ensure that they are college and career ready by the end of high school. Also just wanted to spend a minute on a great new framework that GFE has developed to help funders think about their role in this changing context that's happening because of the Common Core. This framework is part of a new publication coming out from GFE soon, and I'm just going to cover each of the 3 parts of it very briefly here. Each of our speakers today will be accessing different points of this framework in their presentations. First is surveying the landscape. First, taking full stock of how the transition to Common Core is impacting your region. This can mean reviewing and understanding your local Common Core implementation plans, timelines, and capacity. It can also mean understanding the major challenges and pressures facing your schools, school systems, and state departments of education. Here in Florida, for example, Florida Philanthropic Network has just completed surveys of the key superintendents and state education leaders to hear from them their candid assessments of the challenges they're facing, what's working and not, and what some of their priorities are. And we're going to use that to inform the work of our members around their funding of Common Core elements in their education grant making. It could also mean identifying key gaps or pain points in your region's Common Core implementation plans, and perhaps bringing together key stakeholders to help solve the problems together. A second step would be to assess your strategy to ensure that assess if it is aligned with the Common Core implementation. This could mean adapting existing strategies. It could also mean asking new questions of your prospective grantees or current grantees to ensure that their activities are as aligned as they need to be to Common Core expectations. And then finally, choose your leverage points. Choose an approach that matches your priorities, leverages your strengths and interests, and addresses real gaps in the implementation of Common Core in your region. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to our first speaker, who is Gadilia Lopez. Gadilia is Senior Program Officer for Education for the Chicago Community Trust, which offers a really great example of how to use the Common Core to accelerate pre-existing work around grant making. And Gadilia, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. So the first thing I want to just give a little bit of context before I talk about the work that we're supporting around Common Core. And I'll talk a little bit about the education priorities and the strategies that we have and that we have been engaged in for a number of years. In terms of looking at the landscape, as was talked about, and will be discussed more in the document that Dave mentioned, there is a set of research that we look at when we determined what the strategies were and the priorities were that we were going to be supporting in education. And this is three of the main findings that we look at very specifically. One, the first one's really around student learning and what we know that will improve student learning. We know that improvements in student learning only happen when there is attention to the level of the content, attention to teachers' knowledge and skill, and also attention to how students engage in the learning. There's also a set of research from the consortium on Chicago School Research that talks about 5 essential supports for school improvement. And these are found within the parentheses here: leadership, professional capacity, ambitious instruction, student-centered learning climates, and parent-community ties. Of these 5, we really focus on leadership, professional capacity, the ambitious instruction, and how that instruction really needs to be student-centered. And finally, we know that formative assessments are critical to improving instruction, and we utilize formative assessments in a number of different ways in the projects that we fund, from having teachers observe how students are learning in their classroom, what they're doing, how they're thinking about the content, to more formal performance tasks that students complete, and then teachers will look at their results. So I'm going to move next to the trust education priorities, and we have 3 main ones, 3 education priorities. However, we spend most of our dollars and our energy on the middle one, which is strengthening instruction in high-need schools and districts. We've been doing this work since 2002, beginning first by focusing on literacy, and then moving into the other subject areas. The majority of our work in this area happens in literacy, math, and science, although we are beginning to do some work in social science, the arts, and language development. Another priority that we began last year was the topmost one, which is transforming teacher and school leader preparation. And we are trying to work with area universities to really think about what it is that they are offering in their preparation programs, and how does that tie to what we know students need teachers to know and be able to do in their classrooms. And then finally, a smaller portion of our funds are towards facilitating college access and success. There's also a set of resources that we allocate as needed to supporting policy and research relevant to the priorities above, in particular to strengthening instruction in high-needs districts and schools. When we think about how to strengthen instruction, we try to do this at a very systemic level, and try to also focus on sustainable improvements. And we look at 3 main areas. One is content. So how do we raise the level of curricular standards and expectations for all students in the system? We've been doing a lot of our education work mostly with Chicago Public Schools, but now we are engaged with other school districts in Cook County, in Illinois. And in this particular area, we had been focusing on helping the district develop curricular standards in fields and the curricular areas that they didn't have particularly high curriculum standards. This included social science and arts education. However, when the Common Core was adopted by the state of Illinois, we just replaced the curricular standards that we had been supporting within the district. For example, in literacy, that is now, the focus is now on Common Core State Standards, English Language Arts. And in math, the district had a very specific strategy, and we had been supporting that work, but once Common Core was adopted, we moved the work to be focused on Common Core State Standards in mathematics. Also, just notably, we believe in really having a broad and deep curriculum, and so this includes social science, arts, and language. Once you have really high standards, the next thing we address is building teachers' content knowledge and teaching skills to engage and support all students' learning. So this is by working on differentiation and how do you address students who maybe are ELLs in your classroom versus students who may be struggling for whatever reason in that particular content area. And with capacity building, we don't simply stop with the teachers who are in the classrooms engaging in the instruction with students, but we also try to build at the same time the capacity of school and district leaders to understand and support the high level of teaching that we are expecting of teachers. And finally, we know that in order to have sustainable improvements, we really need to work on the support systems, the infrastructure of schools and districts, to ensure that there is coherence across grade levels, across different schools within a district, and from one school district to another when it's the case of having a separate elementary school district to a different high school district, and even within a large system like CPS from elementary to high school. Working on collaboration and on continuous improvement in schools and the system. So this includes time. How do we use time in our districts and school buildings? We like to think of ourselves as a partner with all of the institutions that we work with. This includes school districts and universities. And we do this by putting instruction and learning on the forefront. That is the focus of the majority of our work. We also do this by building coalitions, being a thought partner in developing the work. This oftentimes will be at the very onset of the project, or it may be once the project has been developed, we may ask the partners to think about potential changes given what we know from the research literature as well as what we know from prior work that we've supported. And this is the sharing of knowledge and lessons that we've learned. We also try to continuously assess the needs of the projects as they occur, and there are times when we are able to provide additional funding as needed in order to ensure that the work we're supporting will have the best possible chance of success. The next thing I'm going to talk about just very briefly is the Common Core State Standards in Mathematics, and some of you are probably very familiar with these, but others may not. There are two main elements of the Common Core State Standards for math. One is the standards for mathematical practice, and these are more the skill sets that students need to engage in. So modeling with mathematics as in number 4, or making sense of problems and persevering and solving them, which is the first one. And it's actually a very critical one. If our students think that a problem is too hard to solve, they'll give up and then not engage in the learning. And that's one thing that we are working very critically on in the projects that we support in mathematics. The next slide shows a little bit about the content of the Common Core State Standards. So one of the things that was mentioned earlier is that these are fewer in terms of becoming very focused on very specific content knowledge that students need to engage in at different time points. There is much more coherence and as well as rigor in these content standards. I'll move now to one of the projects that we started supporting, or I should say planning for, in our fiscal year 2010, which is right before Common Core State Standards were released and adopted by the state of Illinois. And this is the Suburban Cook County Mathematics Initiative. The project is focused on really improving the level of mathematics instruction that's delivered to students in these school districts. The slide that I'm on now has the 5-year goals for this project. All of the work that we fund in our priority on instruction, strengthening instruction, typically are funded for 3 to 5 years, depending on how the projects are progressing, whether they're meeting the outcomes they stated. And as you can see, the topmost goal that we have is to improve student outcomes and success in mathematics. Second, we want to strengthen the district's capacity to support improved mathematics and instruction, give them the tools, the strategies, the knowledge that they can utilize after the project has ended. With the onset of Common Core State Standards, we did include in this particular goal the notion of integrating the Common Core State Standards into this work and into the work of districts. And finally, in this particular set, it's retaining highly qualified staff. And the project is aiming to do this by providing really rich experiences for teachers and a good working environment where they feel efficacious. And finally, because of the project and where it's located, we wanted to establish communities of school districts and practitioners that are working together on solving mathematics issues that arise together. These are very small school districts, and you'll see a map next of where these are located. The main part of the map is actually Chicago, where you will see none of the school districts located. This is a project that is focused on 32 elementary and high school districts outside of Chicago in our Cook County area, and it involves 76 schools. These school districts can be as small as 1 school districts, or I think the largest one that we have in the project is about 10 to 12 schools. We, on an annual basis, provide supports from the Searle funds at the Chicago Community Trust in the amount of $1.6 million for the majority of this work that's focused on grades 6 through 9. We also look at what districts are putting into the project in the form of in-kind support as well as additional staff time, and those districts are contributing about $1 million. This is reaching, within the 76 schools, over 530 teachers and over 80 administrators. And in terms of students, we are working to engage and support about 30,000 students. When this project was developed, and this is the phasing and implementation that I'm speaking about now, we had a 1 year of planning with both of these areas. We had a West Cook planning time frame of about 6 weeks, and also a South Cook planning time frame of about 6 weeks. And we engaged with the superintendents to talk about what they were seeing in terms of their mathematics, teaching and learning, to talk about what we knew from the research, and to develop a plan that we could all agree across these 32 school districts. I should say there were 33 in the beginning. 1 district was dropped after year 1. But initially, everyone agreed on the main elements of the project. The project was very strategic in thinking very critically about how to ensure that this project would have success and how it would have sustainability once the 5-year period was over. And so at the very onset, it only worked with administrators of school buildings and districts, as well as 1 teacher leader from each of the 76 schools to build their capacity. And there was very concentrated professional development that happened over a series of time points throughout the year that was focused on what do we know about what high quality mathematics instruction looks like. And again, this is sort of pre-Common Core State Standards really being a main emphasis in the state. But a lot of the things that we began in year 1 haven't necessarily changed, because everything that the research says about what high quality instruction looks like in mathematics is actually embedded with how the Common Core State Standards in mathematics were developed, and all of this aligns very well. So there has been some additions, but it's not been a total shift in the work. In year 2, we brought in the remaining 6th through 9th grade teachers that were working on mathematics instruction in the buildings of the teacher leaders to begin to build a team of folks within those school buildings that were working on strengthening mathematics instruction. And in year 3, we continued all of those pieces. The administrator continued to get professional development. The teacher leader continued to get professional development. The teachers, the math teachers, continued to get professional development. But then we began to talk much more about strengthening collaboration among school districts. What are some of the same issues that come up across these school districts that we should think about working together? One of the main pieces that began in year 3 was a focus on what's a high quality curricula look like, especially in terms of now addressing the content of Common Core as well as the practices that are embedded in Common Core mathematics. And that work this year, we just finished year 3, that work involved 16 school districts looking very carefully, using the NCTM guidelines and tools for looking at textbooks of mathematics to see how closely they were aligned with Common Core, whether they were asking students to engage in the practices the way that Common Core is asking them to do. And then in year 4, we are at the onset of year 4, the summer. There's a lot of summer work that happens with these districts. And in this particular time period, there's going to be more of a focus on sustaining the improvements in addition to the other components. So we're just building on top of the initial capacity building that was started in year 1. In year 4, what this means is that we are bringing together the principals and the teacher leaders much more consistently throughout the year, to have them begin to talk about what are some of the changes that need to happen so that you can actually move forward with high quality math instruction after the project ends and as the project is continuing in year 4 and year 5. I'm just going to talk very briefly about some of the ways that we're doing this work in this project. And we actually took work that had been done in California with the MARS assessments, MARS performance assessments. These are tasks that are designed to have an accessible entry point for all students, build to the grade level core ideas, and finally provide more challenging questions. And the use of these are to inform instruction and also measure higher level thinking of students. It's very interesting to watch how teachers come together to do this and to see what students are able to do that we usually think they cannot do. This shows a little bit of how we use the MARS assessment, and these are performance tasks. And these are the tasks that have been looked at by Park and Smarter Balance, the 2 consortia that are working on the assessments that will look at Common Core ELA and mathematics and help us understand whether students are meeting the goals set within those. They're being looked at to develop the performance tests for those 2 assessments. And so our school districts that we have, that we're supporting, have had 3 years of working with these type of performance tasks. And they are, and the way they're using them is they're having teachers give the assessment, bring their student work together as a group, score each other's students' assessment using a very good rubric that's defined by the Silicon Valley Math Initiative, and then using tools that are also provided by that initiative to think about what is it that students know, what is it that they don't understand, what are the mathematical misconceptions, and then helping them figure out how do I engage students in another conversation about these concepts that will allow them to understand very clearly what the mathematics is behind this and how do we get beyond the misconceptions that they have. So there's a whole set of tools that I can't get into, but that are really helping teachers and principals understand how do you look at student thinking, how do we move student thinking forward so that they are much more prepared for the next step in their education. I am going to move it now to David.
Thank you so much, Cordelia. I really appreciate your comments. I just want to remind everybody, if you do have a question, please be sure to enter into the chat box and we will field all questions at the end. I have one question for you right now, Cordelia. What advice might you have for funders who want to provide some of the high-quality professional development for teachers and principals around the Common Core that you're doing, but that may not have the time and resources to develop the kind of comprehensive approach that you've done? Are there specific things you think would be really high return for the investment that you could advise or recommend to those types?
Sure. You heard me talk about how this work is 6 through 9. We, of course, are being asked by school districts to do K to 5 or pre-K to 5, and we don't have the resources, right? And so we are engaging with Chicago Public Schools to think about a strategy that's going to get at the P to 5 that's just going to be the beginning. So we're going to help them develop professional development leaders for the district. It's going to be a small amount of dollars, but that hopefully over time can be built out to support other educators in the district.
Okay, great. All right, thanks so much, Cordelia. It's now my pleasure to turn things over to our second presenter, Jennifer Grassham, who's Vice President of Grants for the J.F. Maddox Foundation, and that foundation has done work in Hobbs, New Mexico that grew out of a deep long-term partnership with a single school district. And Jennifer, the virtual baton is now yours.
All right. You'll see another quick polling question, if you wouldn't mind, go ahead and answer. Okay, so it looks like roughly 15% are doing Common Core in rural communities, and I think that the rural communities, my presentation will be fine for even those who are not in rural communities. Let's switch over to my first slide, and first I'd like to say hello from New Mexico, and as Dave said, I'm Jennifer Grassham, and I oversee the grant operations for the J.F. Maddox Foundation. And on your screen is our mission statement, and as you can see, education is one of the major areas of focus. We are interested in work that will have a substantial impact and lasting value, and we have a geographical focus on southeastern New Mexico. In recent years, our geographical focus has actually narrowed, and we are now working exclusively in Lee County, New Mexico, which is probably the main reason that our various education initiatives are with the one school district in Hobbs, New Mexico. It's probably worth knowing a little bit about our history with the Hobbs schools in order to understand why we decided to take on such an ambitious project as implementing the Common Core state standards. By New Mexico standards, Hobbs is a medium-sized district. This means the district is small enough for us to get our arms around some of the critical leverage points, but at the same time, the district is large enough to sustain the initiative well after we're out of there. We've been working with the district since the mid-1990s and have been a funding partner for many of their projects, including the initiatives that you see on your screen. So the question is, that we're often asked, and probably a question you have, is why would a funder be involved in the implementation of the Common Core? Before we started our work in Common Core with the Hobbs schools, we really weren't looking for another curricular initiative to fund. But as we started learning more about the Common Core, we became convinced that this was a monumental opportunity. We began to see Common Core really as a way of unifying all of our previous curricular and programmatic work that had been done in the school district over the past 2 decades, and thought, Common Core really has many of the characteristics that we think are very important. One, the aligned standards in all the subject areas for grades K through 12. 2, the prospect of aligned assessments. This is key because in New Mexico, we know that the state test is not aligned with the previous curricular initiatives that are in the schools like core knowledge, AP, the various math programs. And so that means we can't attribute student performance problems to a specific cause. Right now, we don't know if it's classroom instruction or if it's misalignment with the assessment, but it's probably a combination of both. And finally, we wanted the ability to compare our students with students in other states, something that's just not possible at this time. So in 2011, we made a grant for $5 million to support the implementation of the Common Core, all subject areas, district-wide K-12. And this grant was made with the understanding that we would do more work beyond this initial 5-year period, kind of a phase one, but at this time we just really don't know what that looks like. The majority of the funds from this grant are supporting the professional development needed for classroom implementation. And really, unlike many education initiatives, this work doesn't have a lot of flair. It's much more what we would call blocking and tackling. One, we think the teachers need to have an in-depth understanding of the standards and how the standards will change their classroom instruction. Two, the principals need to have an in-depth understanding of the standards and how they can support the change in classroom practice by their teachers. And three, the district administrators need to have an in-depth understanding of the standards and how the changes in classroom instruction and the instructional leadership by the building principals will impact how they allocate resources. And we've just found that everyone from the classroom teacher to the superintendent really needs to understand the standards, how they work, and the impact on the district in order to adequately support this huge shift in instructional practice that's required for this to be a success. So, as it turns out, we think the Hobbs schools are a fantastic laboratory for this kind of work. And on your screen there are a number of characteristics that make this partnership work, but probably the most important is the long-term commitment that is made by both the foundation and the district. This commitment is best achieved by our 10-year grant contract. Over time, we've learned that good initiatives take time to develop, probably anywhere 7 to 8 years. And because both the schools and the foundation want our initiatives to last long enough to be successful, we formalize our partnerships with a commitment by the district to continue the initiative at least 10 years beyond the entering into the grant contract, and which is long after we've stopped funding the initiative, actually. And today, the district has faithfully carried out their end of every agreement we've ever started with them. In addition to helping the schools specifically, the Hobbs schools specifically, we're always hopeful that we can create tools that can be used by other districts as they implement the Common Core. This allows us to have an influence outside of our geographical area of focus without losing sight of our mission statement. So quickly on the rural challenges, there are challenges in being a rural district. In fact, the entire southeast corner of New Mexico is considered rural and poor, and most of the towns are isolated from one another. And while these circumstances certainly have a number of implications, as it relates specifically to implementing Common Core, having a limited teacher pool and limited regional resources are probably the greatest challenges. But in order to succeed, the district has to address these limitations, and unfortunately the deficits, particularly in teacher preparedness, have to be addressed after the teachers are already in the classroom. So the challenges rural community actually further complicated when considering something as big as the Common Core. This radical change in classroom instruction, both what is taught and the depth to which concepts are taught, would be challenging for vested teachers with great access. But these challenges aren't going away and must be addressed, and that's why the foundation chose professional development as its primary leverage point for all levels in the district, at the teacher level, the principal level, and the district administrator level. We also know that the standards, how they're taught, and how student performance will be measured are all still in the rather formative stages, meaning that we just don't have enough information to be confident in how the resources are to be allocated, which is why we think there's a good reason for the Hobbs schools to be a laboratory. We think it's critical that the district have adequate resources to implement the standards and that the funding have considerable flexibility to meet unforeseen challenges, because we just know there will be major hurdles that are just unknown at this time. So in closing, I think there are a few broad stroke ideas that are worth considering when deciding if and how to engage in an effort to implement Common Core. First, this is a long-term effort, and schools will need support well beyond a 2 to 3 year window. Second, good and sustainable implementation of the Common Core will be very difficult to achieve, so have realistic expectations of your school partners. This shift in classroom instruction really is necessary, but it's just going to be hard. We think student test scores will go down, and the severity of the drop will probably be worse and last longer than you might expect. And finally, we think we don't pressure the school district for quick wins. If it's worth doing, it really is worth doing right. Quick wins, just like quarterly earnings, they really do come at a cost. And so we think you want to hold out for a quality implementation, even if it means waiting longer for these sustainable results. And I'll hand it back to David.
Jennifer, thanks so much. I really appreciate your comments. I have one quick question for you. You mentioned the importance of having a long-term horizon for this kind of work, but we also know from GFE's benchmarking survey that most funders make grants of only 1 to 3 years in duration. So what advice might you have for funders who want to make a shift to perhaps longer-term funding and support, and particularly advice on how to make the best case to their boards for that sort of shift in time horizon?
I think what we have found over time is that the longer that we commit to the school district, the more stability that and really faithful execution that the school district shows in return. And so it's not, we just seem to find better results if the school district says, we're going to do this for the next 5 years, and this is our commitment. We've made a commitment to others, and we're going to work hard. And yes, you may see something else that comes up, but we're not going to do that. And so this stability in a school district where stability is not generally achieved, it seems to really have this calming and focusing effect that I think is well worth the commitment of dollars over the long term.
Great point. Thanks so much, Jennifer. Now, before I introduce our third and final presenter, just want to remind people again, if you have a question, please put it into the chat box and we'll get them all answered at the end. It's now my pleasure to introduce Gina Dalma, who's Program Officer for the Silicon Valley Community Foundation. And unlike the previous examples where there's been funders funding deeply in one school district, Gina and her foundation have worked across a number of districts. And Gina, I will turn it over to you to tell us more about that.
Hello, everyone. David, thank you for your kind introduction. First, I want to take a minute to thank GFE and the Education Policy Working Group for their thought leadership and for truly inspiring and supporting all of us to do better work. Before we start, can I please ask you to fill in the question, answer the question that you see on your screen to get a better idea of who's with us? Wonderful. So I see that we have more than half of respondents that fund multiple school districts or fund at the state level. So I'm hopeful that this presentation is useful for you as well as for others. So in terms, for today's presentation, I will first set the stage in terms of our Silicon Valley context and our grant-making work. Then I'll discuss why we decided to focus on the Common Core state standards and why we saw it as an opportunity for system-wide reform. I will follow with our response to the opportunity in the launch of the Silicon Valley Common Core Initiative. And I will finish with our timeline and sequence of work, and then I believe David will also open it up for questions. So in terms of context, there are three key issues that are driving this work. The first is our region's education system structure. The second, our level of academic achievement. And three, our own grant making. In terms of our structure, our region is comprised of two counties, San Mateo and Santa Clara County. And for those familiar with our area, it's from South San Francisco all the way to the rural areas of Morgan Hill and Gilroy. The region has 350,000 students, but it has 54 school districts in our region. So you can imagine that we truly have a patchwork of school systems. They have with little or no articulation and very little coherence. In fact, more than 75% of the students in our region have to go to 2 or more school districts during their K-12 academic pathway. In terms of academic achievement, our proficiency rates are simply unacceptable. We all obviously need and have an urgent need for system reform. Statewide, for those of you in the rest of the nation, yes, California pushes everyone down. We're 46th in the nation in terms of reading, 47th in the nation in terms of math. But in our region, most students, regardless of race or ethnicity, are tracked out of a STEM career by 9th grade. So we're not creating local talent. In fact, 75% of STEM jobs here are held by immigrants to our region. I'll give you one more quick statistic. 42% of K-12 students in our area are students of color, and only 10 to maybe 12% of them are college ready by 12th grade. So in terms of our own grant making, it did provide us with some knowledge and track record to support the Common Core state standards. For the past 5 years, we have been focused on closing the middle school achievement gap in mathematics through a two-pronged approach that you see on your screen, an in-school strategy that focuses on increasing teacher effectiveness, and an out-of-school strategy that is focusing on making sure there's more and better opportunities to learn outside of school. You can see our theory of action on the slide. I think that what is important to mention relevant to this conversation is that our selection criteria for grantees had always been consistent with the intent of Common Core state standards in terms of rigor, relevance, and the resiliency, the grit that Gudelia was mentioning. Also, through our grant-making strategy, we host a learning community of grantees, and we meet quarterly. They have defined the learning agenda, and since 2011, our learning agenda has been focused on implementing and adapting to the Common Core state standards in both strategies, in school and out of school. Through our strategy, we have achieved some success in terms of, more than 15,000 students have participated in out-of-school programming with a mathematics focus. And 2,000 teachers have participating in professional development. But I think it's hard to affect the system when the structure that I just shared with you is so complex, and therefore accountability is almost impossible. So there's two things that truly set the groundwork for our work in Common Core. First, we had been funding or learning in the Common Core state standards space. And second, we had a clear sense of urgency in terms of the impact of our own grant making and what we saw on the ground. So let me define the opportunity. We decided early on that the implementation of the Common Core state standards could provide a framework to achieve two goals. One is a more coherent educational system in our region. We clearly did not want 54 school districts figuring out how to implement Common Core by themselves, and the promise of a world-class education that prepare kids for college or career readiness upon graduation from high school. We also know that the time to act is now. We are at a very unique moment in history, and we're recognizing that there is a window of opportunity that will not last forever. We believe that once the pressure of the timeline passes in terms of our assessments being implemented at the end of the 2014-2015 school year, and the community gets used to those outcomes that will definitely, as Jennifer mentioned, be probably much lower, the window for reform will close. And so we saw this as a real opportunity for reform because all school districts are facing the same deadlines. Implementation will be difficult at every level, and there's a recognition of that, and everyone is new at it. So this has resulted in a common sense of urgency and an openness to think beyond one school district, and we have never seen this openness before. So we also acknowledge that the Silicon Valley Community Foundation is the only regional organization, and it is uniquely positioned to play a crucial role in taking advantage of this opportunity and leading this initiative. So what is the Silicon Valley Common Core Initiative? It is a 3-year effort to support a deep, thoughtful, and collaborative approach to implementing the Common Core state standards in the 54 school districts in our region, with an initial investment of $3 million. And by collaborative approach, I mean, excuse me, school districts working together and coherently to do this well. So there's 3 main objectives for this initiative. The first one is building awareness and public support. We understand that this implementation will not be easy, and we know that we need to build community support to make sure that implementation happens. It happens deeply, and it happens for the long haul. So for this objective, we have built a communication campaign, which we're implementing now. We've hosted convenings. We've hosted more than 17 convenings in the past 4 months, with more than 1,000 people in attendance of our different stakeholders. The second big objective is raising funds and interest for the initiative, using tools inside the Community Foundation, including our donor engagement colleagues, our business services colleagues, and other institutional funders. We are close to raising the totality of our initial objective of $3 million. And the third big objective is to give grants, to assure that through our grants we create this collaborative and deep implementation of Common Core. So the scale and the scope of this initiative goes farther than our traditional program work. So we created a new way of working together internally within our organization that would give us the skills to fulfill the intent of the initiative. We created a multidisciplinary team, again in-house, with communication colleagues, marketing colleagues, development colleagues, and donor engagement colleagues to assure that there was a common message, a common mission, and we would fulfill the goals of the initiative. And together we designed and are implementing plans that use all the tools in the Community Foundation toolbox in a very intentional way. And this is the first time that we have embarked in such an initiative. The funding priorities for this initiative are going to be those that you see on your screen. Professional development, no surprise to anyone. And this professional development is not only of teachers, but of teacher leaders, principals, and school district leaders. Assessment systems, we know that they're going to be a huge and expensive bucket for school districts. Resources and tools, which includes instructional material, technology, and other tools, and what we're calling community. And these are the conversations that need to happen with pre-K providers as well as post-secondary providers and our out-of-school grantees to make sure that there's a holistic approach to Common Core teaching and learning. Now, these 4 buckets are the results of a needs assessment that we undertook in March, where we surveyed more than 40 education leaders in our regions to get a survey of the landscape to see where what were their priorities and how we needed to direct our funding. What's important to mention is that we want to use our funds not to fund the full implementation. We don't think that is philanthropy's role at all, but we want to make sure that we're using our funding to leverage so public monies are invested in the most impactful way. So we don't think we're going to be funding all of the professional development, all the assessment, all the resources and tools, but more than anything, the planning and the visioning process that assures that when the public monies come in, they are used in the most intelligent and impactful way. So you can see our theory of action on the slide. I won't go through the whole thing, but I do want to take this opportunity to reflect on our learnings in the hope that these are useful to some of you. First, because some of them have caught us by surprise. First, as a funder, your voice has significant power to create public will, and most importantly, a common vision. And this is incredibly important to achieve such a massive goal as the implementation of Common Core state standards are. Specifically for those that are in a community foundation or work in a community foundation, don't be scared to use all the tools in your toolbox. Cross division lines. Our donor engagement colleagues were at first hesitant to direct their donor advisors to invest in a strategy that the community foundation was supporting so intentionally. We have received an incredibly, our donors have been incredibly supportive of this effort. Using our marketing colleagues, we created a message and delivered a message that was very consistent and appealing, and we've been very successful in raising money for the initiative. You just need to think and plan collaboratively. And generally, I would say that working to support a collaborative of school districts, as many of you know, is incredibly hard, but it is incredibly necessary, specifically when you face a context like we have in our region with 54 school districts. But the Common Core state standards, we believe, are truly a once-in-a-generation opportunity that does not come without its significant challenges. And the wonderful thing about Common Core state standards is that they're common. That means that we get to work together, think together to better implement together. And finally, you see on your screen our timeline and where we are. So we started with the assessment of needs that parallels GFE strategy. We developed an outreach, a communication and development plan. Those plans are in the midst of implementation. We hosted, again, 17 convenings, more than 1,000 people. These were very busy weeks in our lives. We have hosted several parent-leader convenings because we believe that we all should be truly supporting the community's education and information about Common Core and the benefit that it will provide to our students. We hosted a superintendent convening where we brought them together to think outside the box and outside their school district boundaries to support, to collaborate in this initiative. We released the RFP on June 7th, and it's on our website with the intent of dispersing the first round of grants in early fall. And just to finish, I would like to reinstate a few thoughts. The first is that I think the whole country has an urgency to provide our kids the opportunity for success in college or career. And this framework is, again, a once-in-a-generation opportunity, we believe. We do have a window but it is just a window and it will close, and we need to start acting now. The Common Core state standard implementation will be chaotic. I mean, only in California we signed on to be assessed by these standards by the end of 2014-2015 school year. We still don't have instructional material. We still don't have the formative assessments. There's a lot of decisions there's a lot of information that we still don't have. So we know that this implementation is going to be chaotic, but we need to learn how to live with these uncertainties because we should be in it for the long haul. And we cannot afford to step back. So with that, I will hand it back to David.
Thank you so much, Gina. Great food for thought. We have a number of questions that have been posed by the participants, so let's get right to them. This first question, Jennifer, is for you. I believe you mentioned that the initiative you've been funding is continuing on after your funding has stopped. And so how is that working? Has the district found other private funders, or is public funding taking over after your funding has ended?
The public funding will take over after our funding's ended, but what we do is we typically stair-step down our funding so the district takes on a bigger bite with their public dollars every year, so that by the time they're taking it over, it's not such a big hit to their budget, and we find that works really well. They hardly even realize that have moved and transitioned to fully funding their own initiative without any outside dollars.
Great. Wonderful. This next question is for any of our presenters. Do any of you have concerns about the public resources available to implement the key elements of the Common Core, especially teacher professional development? And I know also there's sometimes concerns about getting the technology infrastructure in place that's for the assessments that are coming. Any of you have concerns about that, and what can we do about it?
So I will. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
So there's a lot that we don't know. There's a lot of needed resources that we still don't have. I will just, but there's some, and there's some states and there's some best practices around that we can look at. The best thing about these standards is that they're common, and we can borrow, share, copy from our colleagues. So there's a lot that we still don't know, but now we're a community.
Okay.
And I'll just add to Gina's comments. This is Gudelia from the Trust. So I totally agree that we don't have all the information, but I think that Gina's right in talking about these are common standards that we have now, and we need to start acting differently from, I think, different levels, not just maybe the philanthropic community, but in Illinois, one of the things that we'd hope would happen, and we're still hoping will happen, and we're trying to work with the state to have them see the work that we're supporting in the Cook County area where we're working with 32 school districts, is to say because we have common goals, we should think about how to promote the collaboration among school districts so that the dollars that they have available are used more wisely, so they can actually leverage a lot more than what they're able to do individually. And so this is one of the things that we're trying to do with this project in these particular 32 districts. With the curriculum assessment that they're going through right now, they will be adopting new sets of curricula as those are ready. They're not, as someone mentioned earlier, they're not ready yet, and they probably won't be ready for another year. But once they are, the school districts are beginning to engage in conversations about if we purchase the same materials in multiple districts, we can potentially also share the professional development costs that are associated with moving to very different types of curricula for the most part for most of these districts. And we're trying to embed that within the work that we're doing in year 4 and year 5 so that the sustainability of the project moves beyond it. But we're also trying to work with the state to say there are some dollars that you already allocate in terms of grants to school districts or in terms of school improvement grant dollars to really challenge school districts, how do you rethink how you are providing those opportunities for school districts in a way that engages everyone to work together?
Okay, great. Thank you. Next question is, how can a smaller foundation, such as a smaller family foundation, have any kind of impact in Common Core implementation? Do any of you have suggestions for any specific niche area that where a foundation like that can figure out where it can plug in effectively? It's such a massive, area to be dealing with.
So we at the Silicon Valley Community Foundation work with a lot of smaller organizations that invest in education, and our recommendation has been make sure that when you're working with grantees, you're providing more than anything information. Because there's so many resources nationwide, one of the needs that came from our school district was that they didn't know who the providers of professional development were, what resources were available, et cetera. So just being able to invest in providing information and bringing the knowledge of those resources to your grantees, if you're investing in education, then I think it's a huge, huge benefit that you can do at any scale.
This is Gulelia. One of the things that we're doing with one of our grantees, and they are raising dollars also, so I would say that they could be thought of as a private foundation to a certain degree. This is the Big Shoulders Fund in Chicago, and they are working with Catholic schools that are in our neediest neighborhoods in the Chicagoland area. In Chicago, we are providing the resources for professional development dollars, and they are raising a smaller number of dollars, amount of dollars, but for the purchasing of high-quality materials. So I think there's ways that different foundations can work together to support school districts or groups of schools to engage in thinking about how to improve instruction as called for by the Common Core state standards and in the future by Next Generation Science standards if they are implemented across the board. But there's ways that different organizations can contribute towards the main goal in a very aligned manner.
Okay, great. Thank you. The next question is about professional development. For those of you that are supporting and funding professional development around the Common Core, do the schools get to choose the providers they work with, or does the funder decide that, or how does that work?
This is Jennifer. In Hobbs, we worked with the school district to mutually identify some providers that we would both feel comfortable with, and I think it helped with the immediate buy-in. And so, the school districts generally don't respond well to being dictated to, and so we try to really, in that term of being a partner, we do a lot of research for them because they have limited time to go out and do this kind of research. They're really trying to run the schools. We bring back a lot of research to them, and then we sit around the table and we talk about who's out there, who could do this work, and who would we both want to provide the training. And so it's a very much in Hobbs and with the foundation a mutual decision.
Okay.
In the Cook County work that we're supporting, we initially started working with the University of Illinois at Chicago as the partner, but we knew that we had to have buy-in from the school districts, so that's why we spent a number of weeks actually in conversations with them about what the work would involve and how the team at UIC would work with the teachers and the principals in those school districts. In Chicago, in the city itself, it's a little different. We have long-standing relationships with a number of different universities, and the district has those same long-standing relationships, and so we do have conversations about who is the best provider, but at the foundation we also have now a request for proposal process, and that's how we've identified some of the partners that we are going to be working with in science to get science instruction at the level that's called for by Next Generation Science Standards. But we are working with Chicago Public Schools at the table and the partners we've identified as having the strength to develop a common set of work around science.
Great, thank you. Gina, this next question is for you. When you started the new Common Core initiative, were there places where you had to pull back dollars from other things you were supporting, or is this new funding, or were there things you had to stop doing? And if so, any significant things you can point to when you made that shift?
So I think it's both. Because we had been focused on mathematics, specifically at the middle school grades for 5 years, a lot of the conversation had been around Common Core. And when we were talking about professional development, we truly were funding mostly programs that as Gudelia was saying, good teaching and effective pedagogies. So without being intentional, from 2011, our funding little by little started supporting Common Core implementation, both in school and out of school. But this initiative is new money, and it has been messaged as this is an opportunity, a once-in-a-generation opportunity that we need to fundraise for. So we have brought together other institutional funders in our region, other partner funders in our region, other small family foundations, as well as individual donors, to say, if you have wanted to invest in education, this is our chance. That is why the communication campaign has been so important, not only building community support for Common Core, but also bringing in new dollars.
Great. Next question is a great one. As state and local public funding continues to face challenges, and we've seen increased efforts to delay, reject, or alter the Common Core, do any of you have concerns that these efforts might be derailed? Some of you talked about that a bit in your comments, but do any of you want to speak further to that?
So I'll start. This is Gina again from the Community Foundation. So we are. I would have never said this before, but we're blessed in California because we just had a budget that passed that actually allows for a specific Common Core implementation and a better budget for our education system. So we're hoping that by building community support at every level, we will limit any attempt to push it back.
So this is Gudelia from the Trust. We are, a little concerned about some of the challenges that Common Core is facing at different levels. In Illinois, we are not from our Illinois State Board of Education. We have, I think, complete support for the Common Core. But we are trying in our conversations to talk about why Common Core matters, and that it's not that the standards are actually the sorts of things that we need to be engaged in. The practices are the sorts of things that our students need to be engaged in order to be competitive at the international level, in order to actually engage in an education system that is going to help our students be prepared for a high quality life, to be civically engaged, and also to engage in the workforce in the future. So we are trying to message those pieces throughout our conversations.
Great. I think the next question is going to have to be the last one. For any of you, again, what can pre-K funders do to help make sure the children are ready for the Common Core standards? Anyone have thoughts on that?
So I think there's a lot that can be done on the pre-K side, and we are beginning to engage in conversations about how do we provide supports for the classrooms that are pre-K through 5 to engage in Common Core. There's some elements that I think already happen in pre-K that engage students in thinking and talking about their thinking that is very productive and that we need to continue. And And I think that we'll learn a little bit more over the next several years because our work is just beginning to go down into those grade levels. I don't know if anybody else has a comment.
Great. Well, thank you so much. Once again, I think I'm going to turn it over now to Christina. There were a few more questions in the queue, so I'll propose that we have GFE work with our presenters offline to get those questions out to folks via email after the call. And Christina, the closing words are yours.
Sure. Thank you. And yes, there are more questions. This has been a great conversation, and I would just encourage you to, this is a plug again for the Education Policy Working Group, where we can dive in a bit more deeply and follow up on some of those questions. I know that all of you are incredibly busy, and so I just want to say thank you. We're very grateful for your time today. And while GFE remains committed to identifying strategies and solutions, we're increasingly intrigued by the power of asking compelling questions. It is within this spirit that I'd like to pose a few questions as we conclude the webinar. Our hope is that they'll encourage you to continue to think about what you've heard today. First, can the Common Core offer a new and stronger platform to address the long-standing challenges in schools that interest your grant-making organization? Second, what added value can your foundation offer to districts? And finally, we've heard some about this today, but how can you use some of the other tools in your toolkit beyond grant making to support implementation work? And just to recap, some of the great examples that were given were about being a thought partner, sharing information and best practices, using your convening power and your voice as a foundation. Again, thanks to everyone, and I just want to provide a few key announcements before we conclude from GFE. I'd like to take a brief minute to mention some of GFE's future programs. First of all, the annual conference, which is themed Philanthropy Rising to the Challenge, Leading a Nation More at Risk, which will be in Houston, Texas in October from the 16th to 18th. Please keep your eyes peeled for registration opening next week. Secondly, GFE will offer an additional webinar as part of its Common Core series for place-based funders later this summer. And finally, funders will reflect on compelling insights and strategies offered at this past May's GFE Early Learning Member Briefing titled The First 8 Years, Dramatically Improving Outcomes for Kids of Color, Poverty, and ELLs through a webinar occurring in the early fall. In closing, I just want to remind you that the full webinar presentation will be available on GFE's website and or via email. We will also follow up later today to provide you with an evaluation of today's program. The survey is short, so please just take 5 minutes to fill it out. Your comments are really helpful to helping us improve our programs in the future. Thanks again, everyone, for participating, and please enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you. Please stand by.